Hello and welcome to South Africa on 99.94 Cricket Every Day. I'm Neil Manthorpe. My co-host is Lungani Zama, but I'm sure you all know that by now. South Africa on 99.94 is your new home for South African cricket content. We'll be dropping into your podcasts feed and on YouTube and on the 99.94 app at least twice a week. So do check out, if you're not checking us out, then check out the new Mitch Johnson show. Which is the former Australian great. He's a proud member of the 99.94 team, and he talks about his life in cricket and after cricket. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts or indeed on YouTube. So we're going to be talking about what's happening in South African cricket, and there is always something happening in South African cricket. There's never short of we're never short of a story, and we try to steer away from administration as much as possible. But Cricket South Africa have just had their annual general meeting, which is a topic that I think we should discuss. And give it some context as well. Zams, there's a 72-page document that was released into the public domain, and it's interesting. There's a lot of rose tinting going on, and very, very little accountability. I mean, at no stage, I understand there are reasons why Cricket South Africa can't say, look, it's been another poor year. Things haven't been great, but we're getting back on track. It's all, I understand, for the corporate world and for potential sponsors, they have to make it seem like everything is just hunky-dory and absolutely fantastic and fine, which obviously it isn't. But I have the sense anyway that it would be really beneficial for the organisation to actually say, we've been through a really tough time. We're still in that tough time, but bear with us because we are on the right road. Instead of which, it's everything's fine, everything's wonderful. I mean, they described losing 191 million this year as opposed to 221 million last year as a 10% improvement.
Well, I mean, I really despise talking about administration because it just frustrates me every time we walk this path. But what needs must. It has been a long road, and obviously the net result is we're still losing hundreds of millions through the game one way or another. What fascinated me is on the same day that statement came out, there was a statement that came out in the British media about a private equity firm looking to invest £400 million into the English game, which...
To buy 75% of the 100.
To buy 75% of the 100. Staggering amount of money. And I mean, England are world champions in both the white ball formats and this and that, but I think what it goes back to is a word that we like to use a lot on this forum, but is not necessarily practiced a lot in actual cricket, which is accountability or transparency. I think if you look right across the English game, its biggest issues are discussed publicly and openly, and its biggest mistakes are admonished publicly and honestly, and then the game moves on. So, with that foundation, you kind of attract the right partners because there's a trust there. I think if we look back at South African cricket over the last 10 years, as the sponsors have eroded one by one and sort of run away and found other avenues to sponsor, almost every single one of them speaks about a lack of trust or faith in the product or the people running the product, more importantly. And you can't get away from that. We can butter it up however we want. We can call 191 as opposed to 200 and whatever million as a gain. It's that kind of lack of honesty, really. It's a problem that you're losing 200 million, and you should look at it squarely in the face and say this is an issue, and we are desperate for the SA20 to be a success to help alleviate some of those problems, but we got to look at ourselves honestly and say these are the things that we need to remedy ourselves without leaning on the SA20.
So there's a couple of reasons that we're talking about this, and that I insist that we bring it up. One of the reasons that there is this level of honesty in the UK and in other countries to a greater or lesser degree is that the people in charge are held accountable by the media. And I regard us and this podcast as an important part of the media. And by talking about it, I'm hoping that we can play a very small role, but a role nonetheless, in holding the administrators to account. They in the UK, they can't get away with flouncing about and prevaricating and speaking with a lack of detail and clarity. I mean, Michael Atherton in the Times actually wrote last month an article in which he lampooned the press releases that are issued by Cricket South Africa, full of jargon and corporate speak, and it's just alienating them, and they get away with it. They keep doing it. They keep just getting away with it. This lack of accountability. Look at all the people over the last 5 or 6 years that have driven the game into the point of bankruptcy now, who've just walked away. They've just walked away. No accountability whatsoever.
Yeah, that's the saddest. I think it's almost like hyenas picking at a carcass, and once they've had their fill, they kind of wander off back into the wilderness, and the carcass is the game. And the few who care about it are, trying to protect it from all corners. But the game keeps on allowing people who are in it for the wrong reasons to come in. I mean, there've been plenty of scandals in South African cricket, and like you say, whether it's presidents or chairpersons of the board, when the heat gets too hot, or even people, in high-ranking executives in CSA itself, they walk away. And you hear things of millions being splurged on random newspaper adverts, which doesn't make sense. You hear whispers, and you wonder if you actually did a proper forensic audit, how many millions have disappeared into the wrong hands. And without that much hiding. So it's desperately sad. But unfortunately, part of this is when you have a sports minister who doesn't really care about the sport. He is the one person who should be able to hold him to account. The only thing he ever held cricket to account for was, in his own vague way, was when the Black Lives Matter movement came into cricket, and that conversation was opened up. Then suddenly, because it was in vogue to talk about it, he suddenly came into cricket and expressed his very vague concerns. But it is a culture of, there's a lack of accountability when there's a lack of actual knowledge about the product and what the product needs. If you're just in a position for the hell of it because you've been told it's a tick box exercise, and you have to put so many people who supposedly are qualified and look like they're qualified in terms of their CV and their background. But if they're not cricket qualified, you're doing the game a disservice, and you would hope that that's what Cricket South Africa is learning more and more. On a related note, I saw, because it is political season, unfortunately, in South Africa, so the president was going around, I can't remember the town he was in, but he said, actually, from now on, we're not going to be employing chancers to run municipalities, which is an admission that up to this point, we've hired chancers. We're now going to make sure we get actually qualified people. It's something that you could say at Cricket South Africa. You hire people that you know are ill-equipped, but you hire them for political reasons. And then when things go wrong, you look back and say, but what went wrong? It's fascinating.
It is fascinating. We're talking about the Cricket South Africa AGM. We'll take a short break and be back with more on the same subject in a moment.
You're listening to Cricket's Conversation on 99.94. Whatever your team, we have the show for you on podcast, YouTube, or on the 99.94 app. We have India, England, South Africa, West Indies, and now Sri Lanka covered. If you want to find us, the best way is to follow us on social media at 9994DM by downloading the 9994 app or Google 99.94 on podcast. We speak cricket.
Right, Zams and I enjoy nothing more than talking about cricket, a game between bat and ball, hitting, bowling and catching it. But it is important, I believe. It may not be for everybody, so you can skip this episode if it doesn't interest you, but we're talking about the culture of Cricket South Africa and the results of the SJN. Rian Richards remains nominally the president of Cricket South Africa. And once again, he said, we should not fear change. We should embrace change. But at the same time, we should not forget our core values. And he spoke about transformation and development. And then Lawson Naidu, who is the chairman of the board, independent board member, heralded the SJN hearings, that's social justice and nation building, the hearings into racism and prejudice that have beset the game since unification in 1991-92. Now, you and I both know the importance of that process, and it needs to be ongoing. The fact that it was public and that it was so messy and painful did the game a huge amount of harm. And it particularly, I mean, I've spoken to sponsors, and you have as well, and they pointed to the SJN, not the process or the ambition of the SJN hearings, but the actual event, the way it looked, the way that it painted cricket. And they said, why would we want to be involved in cricket? Now you've got Lawson Naidu saying that was one of the great achievements of the year. I mean, it was a vitally important process, done horribly, I think.
Yeah, it was a well-intended process, terribly managed. And it started with, which they've then admitted in hindsight, that they probably hired the wrong advocate, because you do need a cricketing knowledge to understand the complexities, which is the first thing that we said right at the beginning. Their reasoning was, no, you can't have a cricket person because they'll be biased. You need someone who's got little knowledge. No, actually, just like people stand around braais and debate selections on the basis of whether a left arm is better than a right arm seamer for certain conditions. There is a bit of technical background that has influenced some of the biggest conversations that South African cricket has had. So what was supposed to be a remedial process became, in certain instances, certainly destructive, because it just opened up wounds which it was never going to close. And it was done so by people who wanted to, slap themselves on the back and say, look, we held the generation to account. The reality is, if you look at it, the majority of the people that were supposedly held to account have moved on to things that are still serving the game, to be frank. And there's still a lot of hurt from those who felt they were victims. But for Lawson Naidu to stand there and say it was heralding it as one of the great accomplishments, you've got to ask, what did it achieve? Measurably, what did it achieve? It opened up a serious conversation, and it forced players to be heard. It forced former players to be heard. But in terms of change, in terms of actual change of managing the game and making sure that people are held to account, here we still are talking about 200 and whatever million lost, and trying to to gloss it up as progress, and it's a major concern when politicians, quite frankly, always lean on transformation as the one thing that they can be accountable for, because it's the one thing that they can say, oh, look, we've got 4 players of color in the team. Transformation goes far deeper than that. As we've discussed in previous episodes, transformation is not just a numbers thing where you force players who are not ready to play just for optics. Yeah, transformation is a systemic change, and embracing of everybody and equal opportunities, and bringing about greater harmony to the game. If you took a poll, black, white, colored, Indian, I don't think a lot of people in South African cricket will say there's great harmony. So it's, transformation is this buzzword that's used to gloss over a lot of shortcomings. But actually, when you unpack it, what is actual transformation? What is success in transformation? It's dangerous. In the wrong hands, it's a very dangerous term, because it makes as if things are progressing and things are changing. But actually, are they?
No, they're not. It's been a complete failure. Oh, well, it's been a majority failure anyway. And that's exactly my point, is you've got the chairman of the board, the president of the board, Rian Richard, saying that we must not forget our goals and our ambitions, and heralding transformation as a vital pillar of Cricket South Africa. And it's failed. It's failed for 25 years. And it's failed, I would put it to you, because they keep doing the same things over and over and over again. What? So Kaya Zondo is, after Temba Bavuma, is the next black African batsman. And he's 32 years old. Where are they? Okay, Max Jordan has been CSA's nominally head of transformation for 20 years. Where's the accountability from him? I mean, it's so frustrating that, we still wouldn't have any semblance of racial representativity at provincial level without quotas. So my question is, why not do something different? Have that conversation. Try something different, because transformation fails and has done for 2 decades.
Yeah, look, again, you juxtapose it against what's happening in business in South Africa at the moment. More and more companies are saying actually they're doing away with that charter that says BEE is a directive for employment, because it sets the wrong precedent, and actually it hasn't always been successful. If you implement it wrongly, it's the same as transformation. If the whole purpose of transformation in the minds of those in charge of it is to see black faces on a cricket field, regardless of their purpose and their actual function and how much development is actually happening, you're doing them a disservice. You're patting yourself on the back because you've got 60% black people on the field. But if only 10% of them are actually genuinely improving year on year, and the rest are there simply to make up the numbers, you get to what you say, where it's Temba and Kaya, and then a long look around the room to say, okay, who's next? Who else? And that's, you can only point at the people in charge of that program, because it's not as if it started yesterday. It started a long time ago. Its intentions are noble and necessary, but like so many things, if it's not thought out properly, and if you have not, I always go back to the fact that if you've not played in a game and sat in a change room where you understand the damage that transformation can do if you do it wrong, you can't possibly try to use it as a fix at the high levels, because it literally damages black, white, colored. It damages every cricketer, because you enforce it as a rule with no thought for consequence. And there's a lot of hurt in South African cricket purely on the basis that there's this rule that everybody's got to abide by, and there's no room for wiggle. There's absolutely no room for wiggle. You must absolutely have 5 black players. Regardless if 3 of them are currently off form, you've got to have 3 black players, which I can't even tell you how many people have turned away from the game and actually gone to absolutely anything else rather than stay and be a placeholder for transformation. And that's black players who can play. But we were just being rushed through the system so that at the top end it looks like transformation is working. And that's a terrible, terrible thing. You don't get, that's topsoil that you just don't get back. It just erodes straight away. Now you've got to force other people not just to play the game, but to fall in love with the game and want to advance in the game. But you can't advance it quickly. You can't. It's a process, which is why it requires a proper plan. England won a World Cup not because they planned yesterday. After 2015, they sat down and said, let's rewrite the book of how we play white ball cricket because it's not working. It's not okay to lose to Bangladesh in the quarterfinal in the manner that we have. 2019 World Cup, they won. They've just won T20 World Cup now. There'll be a decent shout at the next World Cup as well because there was a proper plan in place that removed any bias, that removed any ambiguity, that removed any personal agenda and said, for the good of the game, what is our best course of action here? That's the captain. Those are the players. What do they need? Give them everything they need, and then we hold them accountable. And if they fail, they move out. But it's very clear. It's out in the open. I'm sitting here in South Africa, and I know just how deeply that plan was. I can't tell you any plan that South African cricket has, any pathway. I couldn't. It's crazy that I can tell you about the English game from almost a decade ago, but I can't tell you about our own plans here.
Yeah, I was talking to a dear friend of yours and mine who's now retired, very, very low-key retirement. I saw him at the Wanderers a couple of days ago. He's now gone straight into the SuperSport closer commentary box, and he's told me stories about having to play with an injury because him half fit was better than the next black player. I mean, what does that do for him? We're going to move on to T10 cricket in a moment after this short break.
If you love the language of cricket and want more, then head over to the 99.94 app and you can hear all of our podcasts and cricket commentary. We're adding new shows all the time and covering cricket series from all over the world. Be the first to hear all of our announcements by following us on social media at 9994DM. Welcome to Cricket's Conversation.
The subject of quotas and transformation is certainly one that is we get asked about an awful lot, and we'll most definitely do whole podcasts, and I can really properly pick your brain on it in future exams. But for now, it's interesting. There are, I think, 5 or 6 South Africans playing in the Abu Dhabi T10 League at the moment. Tabriz Shamsi batted at number 8 for his team. I thought I'd mention that. David Miller's there, Riley Rousseau's there, Dwayne Pretorius is there, and none of them are in the test squad, which is due to go to Australia in 4 or 5 days' time. Heinrich Nortje is there. He is in that test squad. Temba Bavuma, as we discussed in our last pod, but it's worth mentioning again, is not playing any first-class cricket. There will be a 4-day game when they arrive in Australia, but he's been given proper time off, which is understandable from a mental health point of view after the T20 World Cup exit. Kagiso Rabada. It's interesting. Charles Langeveld, the Proteas bowling coach, was talking about Rabada, saying he's not a robot. He's 27, and if his workload isn't managed properly, and there's been lots of talk about workload management with Rabada for years and years, and it doesn't seem to happen because he's so bloody important to the team. But I have no problem whatsoever with him being given a proper break and not playing these first-class games. But I don't know. I mean. So Heinrich Nortje is playing T10 cricket in preparation for the Test series. I mean, things have been going well for some others. Dean Elgar's scored some runs. Ryan Rickleton, we mentioned in the last pod, has scored back-to-back hundreds, having been declared not fit enough to tour with the Proteas. Where has your eye been drawn to ahead of the Australia Test Series? And what about the review, by the way, of that T20 World Cup exit? Again, we just mentioned it. Sorry, I'm asking you 5 questions in one go here, but there's been no communication whatsoever about the review that the Director of Cricket, Enoch Nkwe, promised us into that defeat to the Netherlands. No updates whatsoever. And I mention it because people are asking me, and I can direct them to 99.94 to get their answers in future. But there's been no communication whatsoever. I've heard secondhand that some players have been interviewed. I don't know which players, and I don't know by whom. There was a panel supposed to be formed. What have you heard?
The only justification for Temba not being on a cricket field at the moment is if he is one of the people who's playing a key role in that review. That's the only justification, that he's explaining exactly what happened and he's needed in meetings to unpack what happens next. Otherwise, I'm sorry, the reason he's out of form is because he hasn't played. So to then not give him the opportunity to play at least some cricket before he then goes to Australia, you're literally setting him up for more failure. Because if he goes for the first and second test, doesn't make runs, you're going to say, oh, he hasn't played enough cricket. He's just had 2 opportunities to play and play and play when others have been making hundreds and doubles and triples. When he's not playing. I just don't. I'm sorry, I don't understand. Like, you say it's justifiable because of the mental angle. The only way you get over something is getting out in the middle and playing. Find some form, find some fluency. Because I promise you, if there's a mental issue, Australia are going to zone in on it hard. Like it's bizarre, absolutely bizarre. Anrich Nortje playing T10 cricket. At least he's playing, and at least he's only bowling a couple of overs, so he'll be fit. He'll be firing. You're gonna bowl fast for a couple of overs. That's all. And quite frankly, all these leagues in the world are putting a gun to South African cricket's head, saying if you dare say no to a player for no legitimate reason, and there's not much legitimate reasons outside of ICC World events and the little Test cricket there is. You're not really going to say no. You kind of turn a blind eye and let them be because you can't afford to pay them that. So you kind of just allow it and hope no one notices. But yeah, the review, and this is the thing, when you see the iceberg ahead and you say we're definitely going to hit that iceberg, and the captain of the ship says, "Oh no, we'll fly around it. Don't worry." But you can see no change of course. We knew that this review would come to nothing. It's been almost a month. We're going to go to Australia and come back from Australia. There'll be bigger issues because if things go according to the form book, South Africa might struggle over there. So then it'll be a bigger issue than just losing to Netherlands. It'll be long forgotten actually by then. So it's just a nonsense, to be honest. It's just a complete nonsense. Rather say, we lost, it's a pity, we move on. Rather say, then no one's sitting around for a month waiting to see, okay, what is this review? What is it going to show? Are heads going to roll? Are things going to change? Are we literally making a line in the sand and saying this can never, ever happen again? We can't lose to a minnow, all due respect to the Netherlands. Or is this just going to be another one on the pile of things to do that never get done? I mean, just be honest. We're not going to do anything about it. We can't. Because we're not going to drop our captain. We're not going to change our team. We're just going to hope to goodness that we can forget about it and pretend that it was a terrible nightmare and we just move on. Just say that. Then everybody can say, okay, cool. It's great. At least we know. Where's the review?
Or at least tell us at what stage it's at. I mean, some communication. But as I said, there's no culture of honesty within Cricket South Africa, and that has to change. And we will play a small role in doing that, Lungani Zama, you and me, here on 99.94. Final point for this pod. It's the precedent is set now. I mean, with those players playing in the T10, South Africa has all this brave talk about having our best players available to play here, but like I said, the precedent is set. So David Miller, fine. I mean, he doesn't play. He retired from first class cricket. Not sure what Riley Rousseau's status is in first class cricket. I haven't seen him play for any first class cricket for a long time, so that's fair enough. He probably wouldn't have got a game in the first class structure. But Dwayne Pretorius is very much a first class cricketer, as is Anrich Nortje. But I mean, it twofold. They cannot earn anything like the money playing domestically that they can earn in any of these leagues. So on that level, they have to be given an NOC to go and play in these leagues. But secondly, it shows us exactly where the regard for the first class game is at the moment.
Well, yeah. If you're playing a handful of test matches, it kind of forces your hand as a player as well to say, let me make what money I can where I can, because clearly I'm not going to be making any test appearance money, and I'm not even sure if I'm still part of the test squad plans. Dwayne Pretorius was, but Marco Jansen looks like he's ahead of him, and a few others even. So once you get the wrong side of 30, players get selfish. And we currently, as a cricket nation, we're dangling somewhere between, what we feared in terms of what the West Indies are, where players pick and choose what they can do, and a more established nation with a bit more assurance, with national contracts that mean something. I mean, they kind of mean something for now, but how much longer? Little things like this tell you, where a player says, I will go there first, and then I will meet you in Australia. If a few years ago, those players would be in a training camp now, having come off a full round of strong franchise cricket with every single South African player ready to, fight for their place for that first test in Adelaide. Instead, do what you must. We'll meet you at the airport lounge and see what we can do in Australia. Let's hope for the best. Crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah. It certainly is. We'll have more in a couple of days' time. Thank you for listening to South Africa on 99.94. Please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. You can download the 99.94 app as well, and follow us on Twitter at Neil Manthorpe and at Wamzam17. That's all for now.